today we are debating Bill C-50, and this is a bill that some of my Conservative colleagues, I believe the member from Barrie Innisfil might have been one of them, called this bill yet another Seinfeld bill, a bill about nothing. This is a bill that really doesn't do much other than, from the government's side, try to give some type of legitimacy to their practice of exchanging cash for access. These steps toward transparency are really, given the existing law, are very, very minor in nature, and they do nothing to address what the previous speaker had characterized as the elephant in the room, which is the exchange of cash for access. So for the benefit of those that have not followed the debate or aren't aware of some of the background, it's really necessary to understand the background to grasp just how really almost meaningless this bill is. The current laws on election finance already limit financial contributions to those from individuals only. They limit them to just over $1,500 per person. They expressly ban donations from corporations and from unions, and they ban anonymous contributions of over $20, and they require public disclosure of any contribution over $200. So, Mr. Speaker, all of these transparency messages that are transparency pieces that we hear from the government in debate on this bill that they congratulate themselves for exist in the current law. We're just changing the dates. We're going to make you report a little bit sooner than you otherwise would find out. But already, Mr. Speaker, anybody that contributes $200 or more to a political party is subject to disclosure. So this transparency piece that they speak of already exists. Everybody is already going to be disclosed if they give over $200 to a political party. So these rules all came into place early in the previous Parliament. The previous Parliament had a mess of ethical and scandal to clean up when it came into government, and the new and current electoral fundraising laws are a part of that. In the previous Parliament, under the existing rules that came in, cash for access was not an issue. It was understood by members of the previous government that their Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, wouldn't tolerate it. I've spoken to my colleagues on this side who were ministers in the previous government, and they are absolutely appalled by the cash for access system that the Liberal Party and its government have, because they knew that it was wrong. The ministers in the previous government knew they'd be cut off at the ankles if they tried to shake down their stakeholders and their lobbyists for money by doing cash for access fundraising. So it was a practice that was not done under the current law and only began when this government took office. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill purports to be a solution to a problem that only exists for one party, for the Liberal Party of Canada. So this bill is really unworthy of support because it is simply designed to give cover for a practice that will still then carry on. And they will no doubt later congratulate themselves for passing this bill and claiming then that there's nothing wrong for cash for access because they changed the date with which the reporting has to happen and compelled themselves to start holding their events more publicly and to not, for example, use search engine protocols to bury results when people go to look for Liberal fundraisers. So, as has been remarked in some of the previous speeches, the Liberals did run on a grand platform and promised a number of things, including electoral reform. Some members in some parts of the country ran on a sort of pro-pipeline agenda. Others in other parts of the country were anti-pipeline, sort of promising different things in different parts of the country. They promised limited deficits. They promised a balanced budget within 2 years after running a maximum $10 billion deficit. They promised access to information reform. They also boldly declared, and the Prime Minister himself promised to lead the most open and transparent government in Canadian history. And that's now the punchline really of a bad joke in the wake of his own conduct, his own findings of having been in conflict of interest and violating 4 sections of it on his vacation, as well as the whole cash for access system, which took form very quickly after they came into office. So it was really through the media that Canadians came to understand just the scope and breadth of cash for access fundraising that was taking place. We heard about episodes that the member from Frontenac Kingston spoke of earlier when he talked about how Chinese nationals who are not allowed under the existing law to contribute to political parties are meeting privately in private homes to lobby the government, to lobby the Prime Minister directly. We've heard about the Minister for Justice having a cozy fundraising event at a Bay Street law firm among other lawyers and perhaps judicial applicants, future ones. We've heard about the Finance Minister and his cash for access fundraising, the Industry Minister. This is widespread, Mr. Speaker, and this was a central part of the Liberals' fundraising apparatus that only came to a halt, sort of, when it came to light through media reports beginning in the later spring of 2016. And so here we have today this bill before us, which the Liberals will, I'm sure, congratulate themselves on having dealt with this criticism, but leaving the elephant in the room. Cash for access fundraising is wrong, Mr. Speaker, and this bill will not make it right. And I see that my time is up, and I'll continue after question period.
Being interrupted for question period, and he now has 3 minutes remaining in his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we certainly wouldn't want to hold question period up, so I was happy to yield at that time. And with the 3 minutes or so that I have left, just to pick up, I spoke of the background and the history on this bill and the issue purported by the Liberals to solve being that of a problem with fundraising, that this party is the only one with the problem. Mr. Speaker, we know that cash for access fundraising and the calls to eliminate and calls to question and be concerned about the conflict of interest inherent in cash for access fundraising were the reason for this bill. They had to do something. They had to be seen to be doing something about a practice that only this government and this party has. So they tabled the bill that we are now debating. And Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I said before question period, it was not necessary when, of course, this government could at any point just simply choose not to shake down its own lobbyists and stakeholders for money for the party by its own members of its own cabinet that have the power to dispense contracts, that have the power to hire people into the public sector, to make judicial appointments, to put out cash to subsidize businesses. These are the powers that a minister of the Crown has. These are not powers that members of the opposition have. These are not powers that leaders of opposition parties have. These are not powers that backbenchers on the government side have. These are the powers that a minister has. And Mr. Speaker, it is the swinging back that we've heard, I'm sure we'll have some more in a minute or so, that this is something about anything other than cash for access fundraising is just silly. So, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude just by reiterating that I do not intend to support this bill. To do so would be to lend credibility to a government that is merely seeking cover for a practice that Canadians find odious, for a practice that nobody besides the members of the opposite party think is okay. I'm not going to allow them to use the passage of this bill to be able to say that they have somehow sanitized and legitimized the practice of cash for access. Thank you.